Andy is a student of theater and tea, a medical massage therapist, a former organizational coach, a conscious kinkster, and a teacher of European and Japanese rope bondage, living in Stockholm, Sweden, and working around Northern Europe. In his own words, I work with both groups and individuals, and I love that the world is allowed to be complicated because that makes every meeting unique. My time in Japan engraved into me the presence, passion, and embrace for the glimpse of Zen that exists in every movement of life. And this I gladly share with you in a session, workshop, or with a cup of tea. In the stillness between moments, life happens. Pause. Witness. Hello, everybody. I'm so pleased to introduce you today with me for a new episode of the Healer Hub podcast, Andy Buru. Hi, Andy. How are you?
Hello there. I'm great, thank you.
So we were just discussing the provenience of your surname, and it would be great if you could tell the story, and we would actually start there.
The story of me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm Swedish. I grew up in like this kind of super equal 1969 leftish socialist kind of country. And at quite a young age, I got interested in BDSM and power and polarity. And spent like my youth from like, I don't know, 16, 17 up to like 18, 19, 20, more older, like getting into BDSM. And then I spent some time working in Japan. I got in contact with rope bondage there. And then that kind of led me into the world of Tantra and kind of spirituality and like the world of like healers and healing. And during this kind of period, I was always been very like curious about like human sexuality in relationship to power mostly. And then kind of as years went by, I got more and more in contact with people that had kind of traumatic experiences connected to power and sexuality, which I think is not everyone, but I think it's like a very common like place where trauma stems from. And I got asked like, because normally in like the world where I come from, in like the BDSM world, like you try to stay away from trauma. Like that's a place you don't want to go. That's why you have the consent negotiation and like your stop word to kind of stay away from the kind of maybe more vulnerable parts of it. And when I got asked by people, like, hey, but can you tie me anyway? Because I'm curious about it. Like I know my trauma, or like I can have my friend there. And I was like, first I was like, no, this is like, it's too scary for me. I don't want to go there. But then I started to do it slowly but surely, like with friends of friends or someone recommended someone. And like over the past, is it 10, 15 years, maybe 10 years is the most accurate. I started to offer paid session with like rope bondage as some kind of therapeutic modality.
Yeah.
And then in parallel to that, being a teacher of like this kind of more Japanese, more like bondage is more focused on erotics and being in the world of BDSM. So I'm like kind of with one foot in the Tantra spirituality world, one foot in the BDSM world, and one foot in the kind of more kind of therapeutic world.
And this is what I find really profound in your work, because you are drawing from Tantra and Taoism and Shibari, which is the art of using ropes, and it seems from Japan. And then you kind of wrapped everything with the bow of healing. And I watched the documentaries and then the videos that you created, and it really strikes me the softness and the tenderness and the vulnerability that come through in your sessions. Would you speak a bit about the power dynamics and why women who have been through I also believe that everybody has been through flavors of trauma, and that's just normal and inherent to the human nature. So going back to my question, how are you holding the people that you are working with in a rope therapeutic bondage session?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to like make distinction on like what kind of client it is, because I have very different types of clients. Like I usually split them into three different categories. Like either I have people I would say that are traumatized, that are really traumatized, that has probably been the victim of like repetitive abuse and like the horrible stuff. And then I have some clients that are more like they are like successful women in like a patriarchal system where they are fighting hard, probably harder than any man to be, to get through, and like they're looking for a place to let go of control. They're not like the rape victims, so they're not the one with abusive parents. It's just like it's like the, what do I say, like it's the masculine woman in the masculine world in a way. And then I get some people who come to me, they are just kind of curious about their sexuality. And they say, okay, so BDSM is a thing, rope bondage is a thing, and like, what do? Do I go on Tinder and I write in my Tinder profile, like looking for dominant man, or do I go to like a bar and look for the kind of guy who looks scary and try to pick him up? But like, how do I kind of get to explore BDSM and sexuality like on my own terms? And then it's not really healing at all. It's more like some kind of private investigation into who you are and like how you work. And then some people are, of course, like a mixture of all of these three at the same time.
Yeah.
So for the people that are like really traumatized, I would say what they do is super soft, because just like being alone with a man in a room again is a big thing. Like just being allow yourself to be held is a big thing. So it's like the bondage part of it is it's not so complicated. It's the complicated part is like the interhuman relationship. It's like wrapping a body in ropes while holding them. So yeah, I think it has a lot to do with like gaining power back of your own kind of intimate experience, because like 99% of my job is to listen to them, because like someone obviously was abused was not listened to, or so kind of learning that, teaching a person that I will listen to them and that their experience matters. And then like in this process, what we do is that I tie them in rope. Like someone joked once, like you don't need bondage to do this. You could do this with just your hands in a way. But then of course, since like I have this background in like Japanese rope bondage and it's like a passion of mine, then it becomes natural for me to use this as my modality. So I think has a lot to do with this kind of empowerment and kind of being listened to and learning how to kind of to come back to your body in this experience, and like knowing what you like and what you don't like, knowing should I be like shit scared of this or should I feel safe in this place, because like if you have a traumatized nervous system, it's kind of out of tune in a way. It gets triggered by things maybe it shouldn't be triggered by, and it doesn't get triggered by things it should be triggered by. So it's like kind of retuning your nervous system and finding like and some safe environment to do that in. And then like we need to have some kind of polarity or some kind of play, because if we want to explore the subject of power and eroticism, then we need some kind of thing that touches upon that. And then for me, like bondage is the perfect way of doing it.
Yeah. As you're mentioning this, I was thinking about the safety and going in and out of safety. And for somebody who has been through assault, for example, it can be very easily re-traumatizing being in a space where they maybe for the external regard, it is a safe space, but for a nervous system that has been traumatized, it can be easily re-triggering. And I imagine that being in the context where in your energy, not only in your space, you create that safety, and then you give sovereignty to the person that you are working with for them to be safe and then feel unsafe, and then it's like pendulum, safety, unsafety, safety, unsafety.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also that like I have a few friends and I talk to many psychiatrists like over the years that kind of work more with like talking based therapy. And for me, that seems much more violent and brutal, because then you kind of go back and you retell the traumatic experience and you're asked to come back there and feel it again. I mean, of course, there's more like modern forms of therapy that's more like this, like acceptance and commitment therapy, when you don't go back to the shit in a way. But for me, like, I don't have any reason to have someone relive the same experience. It's more like we do something that brings them into contact with this kind of, with what is scary, what kind of is triggering the nervous system, and then we back off. So it's kind of like retraining the nervous system that this is not dangerous in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, you need to trust me. I mean, otherwise it doesn't work.
Of course, yeah, and also trust themselves in that context. I imagine that you know about this book, "The Body Keeps the Score." It it became a
Yeah.
bestseller because it resonated, like, for so many of us, right? It was the reveal of the fact that we can go to talk therapy, and talk therapy can do that much. But basically, through talking and retelling the narrative, you are just reinstalling every time that you are telling the same neural path, right? Whereas the trauma actually lives in the body, in the fascia. So when you go and do the body work, then there is a part of the trauma that is leaving the body because it's accessed there where it lives inside the body.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm really inspired by the work of a woman called Judith Herman. And she kind of created this model of post-traumatic stress. And she says, like, the first step is get away from the traumatizing experience. It's like if you are in a destructive relationship, you need to leave the relationship. And then, like, the next step is kind of to retune your nervous system so that you kind of can exist in normal society again. And then it's about learning to reintegrate into society as the third step. And I'm kind of consider myself being like there somewhere in the end of this process. So most of the clients that I receive, they know their trauma quite well already, and they've maybe been to talking therapy or some kind of social service to kind of get out of the destructive situation. Because I don't think I could take a client that is like in an active traumatic situation. It's more like this part, okay, I want to date a dominant man again. Like, what do I do to like being able to coexist with this person in a way? Or maybe not even a dominant man, just any man, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. After having been through trauma and, like, heteronormative situation where a woman was abused by a man, of course every man looks like a potential threat, right? You mentioned BDSM, and I this is the first time that we're actually speaking about this publicly on the podcast. And I was on a retreat last year in Sweden, and it was a women's only retreat, and we got to explore the dynamics of dominant and submissive, but in a female energy kind of a context. I would love if you could touch upon polarity, and I know that it's such a broad it's such a broad subject, because I think that there is an interest in BDSM and power dynamics, and as you mentioned, also maybe with the feminist movement and where there is more space for women to actually embrace their sexuality and speak openly about that, but then maybe there is still a lot of conditioning from the religious background, like the whole Europe and a big part of the world that has been religiously conditioned. Yeah.
I mean, I think what it comes down to is in the like to have two different roles or two different ways to relate that are mutually dependent on each other, that kind of benefit from you benefit from the difference to another person. I mean, the easiest way to explain is like the leader and the follower in a dance. Like, the better the follower is to follow, the better the leader can lead, and vice versa. And it's kind of there's like an activity that both people are active in. So like, I mean, if you dance partner dance, you know that it's once you get good, it's much harder to follow than to lead. So like it's like an active relationship where you create a difference between you in a conscious and consensual way. And then like if you look at the like in the tantric world, people talk about the masculine and the feminine without connecting it to gender. In BDSM, you have it like between the master and the submissive, or the dominant and the submissive. You have it also like by the sadist and the masochist, if you talk more about like the physical experience about it. So you have all these different polarities that turn people on, or like that is like part of the driving force of like sexuality or attraction. So it's like a way to create like a safe frame for this, because like you want to be equal, or maybe you do, but I do want to be equal like outside the play, and then you want to create this kind of container where you can play with this polarity, which is kind of what we don't want in the everyday life. And a way also to think about this is almost like you make a parody of like the power games that we play in everyday life, because then we are forced to be dominant, we're forced to fight for power, and then we take them in a consensual way and like put them into like the frame of, call it BDSM, call it tantra, or like, I think this is polarity is what people are looking for.
Yeah. So I work as a coach, and I trained with Leila Martin. And what I find is that when things are not consciously explored, then they come out unconsciously in relationships. So all relationships have a flavor of power dynamics and dominance. And for myself, I found that I have a very strong sadist. And this sadist would come out in relationships, and I would need to inflict emotional or psychological pain, because that's how, because I didn't know how to consciously channel that, right? So then when you take the pulsions that you have in your life and you explore them consciously in BDSM, then the drama that is happening in real life is no longer drama, because it has been consciously addressed and played with in a context that is safe, consensual, as you said. And I find it really, really therapeutic. I find it very healthy to have this.
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, first, your experience echoes my experience as well. Like, I'm a lot less interested in looking for power or fighting for power in my everyday life when I'm so used to playing with it within like this context of BDSM. And there is also like quite a lot of studies nowadays showing that people that has a BDSM background has like a more healthy relationship to power. I can send you the links, and you can include them in the description of the podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe people want to see. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. I was also thinking about what you mentioned, that when people start with the exploration, or they just have this ping of, oh, I would actually like to engage with a more dominant energy. It could be a female who is more on the dominant side, or a male, or a non-binary. And I think that it's really, really beautiful that now we have contexts where people can explore this in somehow professional and contained way, because I think that a lot of people think that they are practicing BDSM, but it's actually very toxic, because there are no rules, and there is no safety, which for me is extremely, extremely important. So your work brings people into peeking into what BDSM truly is and how it actually feels, instead of being kids who are meeting on Tinder and then start exploring, but in a not very healthy or contained kind of or like designed way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, I mean, that is like the big challenge, I think, with BDSM. Like, how do you separate what is like, let's see if I can say this in English in a good way. Like, what is truly, do you say malignant, like truly evil? Like, pretend like someone was like consciously doing something to hurt someone else, like a rapist looking for victims. How do you distinguish that from someone that makes an honest mistake? because they are not educated enough, or because they don't have proper guidance when they step into playing with power and like polarity and violence and pain and all of these things. And someone who kind of does it, I don't know, I don't want to use the word in the right way, but like in a who kind of is successful in what they're doing, and like how do you kind of distinguish this, and not end up in this kind of murky water saying that like all BDSM is bad, for example, or yeah, that's
Yeah,
something that often goes on in my own head. Like how do you make this kind of separation into, yeah, and how do you know in a way? And I think, but the best way to do it is to have like a community and like a community and like other peers and like education to have someone to reflect upon your experience with. So you can go to retreats or workshops or sessions, or you can be online chatting with people, go to like a munch or a pub, or like any way to kind of meet up with other people and kind of get like a reality check on your experience, and a way to meet like kind of like-minded people. I think that is kind of what makes it safer. It's
yeah,
kind of it always makes, I think it's always funny to me, because a lot of people that come into the BDSM world, they always say that they feel so much safer in a BDSM club than in a normal nightclub, because like since this discussion have been ongoing like in the BDSM subculture for maybe since it's like the 90s, maybe 80s, depending on how you define it. It's like this continuously ongoing discussion with consent and so on. So when it kind of comes sailing up in the Me Too movement and in like general society, it's like, yeah, we have had this discussion for, I don't know, 30 years already, because it's so important in with the kind of activities that we do. And that's why I think it's like, and I think it's equally important in like the big society as well.
yeah, 100%. And that's I'm going back to what we were mentioning a bit earlier. I see, like when people mention, like make the distinction between BDSM and vanilla sex, and I'm thinking, there is no such thing as vanilla sex. There is such a thing as people being heavily conditioned to not speak about sexuality, even in couples where I have conversations with other clients or my friends, and they need to find a subterfuge. They need to find a place where they can explore the pulsions that they have, the desires that they have. And when I ask them, why wouldn't it be appropriate to have these conversations with your partner? The answer
Mm.
is, well, I would be judged. They would look at
Mm.
as if I'm very strange, right? So I think that the more we normalize having these discussions in public spaces, the more we can see what is pathological, because there are people who have pathological behavior and then they need treatment, and it's not at all on the normal spectrum. But I feel that a lot of people are on the normal spectrum, and just because society has conditioned us so powerfully to keep what is sexual hidden and in the shame and the guilt, in the shadow of the shame and the guilt, a lot of people do not know where they can healthily engage with their their desires and their curiosities, and that there are spaces where they can safely do so, instead of going on um maybe apps, or like the spaces that are more on the dark side, and where there isn't a lot of consent, and there isn't a lot of safety, but at least there is a space where people can go and explore these things, right? So I'm more on, okay, let's make it healthy and let's make it conscious, instead of keeping people in dark corners where you don't really have a lot of safety.
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly what you put words on a few moments ago in this, like whatever you repress, it will express itself somewhere else in your life.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's I don't say universal rule of life. Or yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see it a lot. Like the most consumption of porn is in most religious and sexually repressed societies. So
yeah,
statistics back it up.
yeah. I was thinking about when I was listening to you, like, but maybe you can have a relationship without any polarity or any like play or power if you are willing to have a relationship without passion. Like if you kind of decide that, okay, we're just going to have kids, so we will have mechanical sex to have offspring. And then for the rest of our life, we will kind of focus on something that is not passion. Um, like kind of following a religious dogma or like committing ourselves fully to work or something. But I think as soon as people start to look for passion, then you kind of come these things like with polarity, playing with power, playing with control.
Yeah.
Um,
And of course,
yeah.
the perspectives that we hold are our perspectives. Like my perspective is that of a white ex-Christian heterosexual privileged woman. There are so many. There is a spectrum so large where, of course, if you're coming from let's say like a, and I don't have a lot of tangibility on this, an Amish community. Uh,
Mm.
Speaking freely about sex will not will not be on the table, right?
Yeah.
But on the more on the more general, like a larger part of the population, it's very interesting for me that still in 2023 we've been through so much and we've reached
Mm.
all these levels of tech, and we still have a lot of people who are living with suppressed sexual energy, and suppressed sexual energy leads to a lot of disbalance inside the body,
Mm.
imbalance inside the mind, and all sorts of quirky, unhealthy ways of being in the world. And I think that that's what, like, my deep pain comes from that, because of course I also
Mm.
have shades of that, just like everybody else, right?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think for me it's like easy. Like I can see that the people who find me, that I can help them. And I can see also the people who are looking for like more passion or like a more healthy relationship to power and sexuality. They tend to get it through
Mm.
these modalities of BDSM, rope bondage, and tantra in a way.
Yeah.
And it's good enough for me
Yeah.
to kind of offer this as some kind of service.
Mhm. You mentioned eroticism. So what do you see eroticism as, and how do you use eroticism in your practice?
Yeah. I think it's the reason why I use eroticism instead of like sexuality is that because I think like what most people long for is intimacy,
Mhm.
like feeling deeply connected to another person, like where I'm willing to meet another person as like an unknown we that we can kind of explore who we are together or become something new together. Um, so I think this is what people long for, to like feel connected to other people and like have this meeting that is like intimate. And I think a lot of people today think that the only way to be intimate is to have sex
Mm.
or like to fuck in a way. I don't. Sorry if I'm not allowed to say fuck on your fest.
No worries.
Anyhow, no worries. Yeah. So I think the only way people look for it, not only everyone, but many people find intimacy in sex today.
Mm.
And I kind of want to kind of bring up that like the attraction and desire and fantasy is like bigger than just sex. I mean, especially if you look in the world like a rope bondage, it's very rarely leads to like penetrative sex. It is like an exploration of the eros or of the eroticism, or like what you're attracted to, what you're turned on by, to the taboos, to the shame, to the fears. So it's, for me, it's like much more in the realm of like self development or some kind of spiritual path. What word do you want to put on it? So that's why I kind of like this word eroticism, because it kind of touches upon that we have these erotic beings inside of ourselves that is attracted to something.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and creating the arena to explore that. That's why I like the word.
Yeah. I wonder, are you familiar with Esther Perel's work?
Yeah. I love her.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I think that
mean,
she
her
brought.
saying, "What is it like? Whatever we protest against during the day is what we fantasize on during the night," or something like this. She's one of my heroes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful because she brought it on the social agenda, or she brought eroticism to light. And I really appreciate the view that she holds about foreplay, and how foreplay is not something that happens 5 minutes before penetrative sex, but it's all
Mm.
along creating this erotic encounter with your partner and with the world also, because eros is life force too, right? And we have eros within our bodies, and then again, when you do not allow it to flow, it kind of gets transmuted in more unhealthy types of behaviors.
Yeah. I mean, I really much think it's like a story that you tell together with your partner,
Mm.
and it's like told over the whole span of a relationship with another person, and that you kind of come together and you have this kind of ritualistic practice of sharing your eroticism. But then kind of when you're not acting it out together with your partner, then it kind of lives inside of yourself, in how you think about your partner, how you treat yourself, what you daydream about, what you dream about at night. Like it goes through all of you in a way. I
Yeah.
don't remember who said this. I think it was in a book about wonder, and they kind of argue like, I mean, maybe you could live without humor. Like you don't need humor to survive, but if you have humor, like life is nicer in a way, in many ways. And I think it's a little bit with eroticism as well. I think it's perfectly possible to survive without having an erotic life. But I think if you do, life is better. And like there is no reason why we should not allow ourselves to have this.
Mm. I do wonder. See, like for me, this just doesn't sit well, doesn't sit well with me. Again, maybe because I'm privileged. I was born in '86, so of course I only knew the idea of romantic love. I haven't lived when back in the '40s when I had to sign the social contract that I will give my
Yeah.
womb for shelter.
Yes.
Not even, because I think that my grandparents were. Yeah, like we're in a love marriage, like in a romantic marriage. But Esther Perel speaks about how romantic love is a very new concept, right? Before
Mm.
marriage was the basis of of society, because it was a social contract, and it still is
Yeah.
in so many ways. But I feel that, and I'm grateful that you mentioned that. I feel that a lot of people, again, I think that is the repression of the sexual energy, view equal sex with intimacy. And gaze is such an intimate way of connecting with somebody. Breathing next to
Mm.
others, sharing a context. I know that you organize also group workshops, right? So
Mm.
sort of intimacy in which people witness each other and witness you,
Mm.
when you are um, doing the shibari work, and witness the other person having that experience. And I feel that that's something that is deeply intimate and deeply bonding people over
Yeah.
this shared moment.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's the most intimate thing that I found. So I think that's why I kind of got so nerdy about it, and why I stick with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You also have a background in theater, and you mentioned at one point that doing the kind of work that you are doing is also staging in a
Mm.
way. So, would you comment a little bit on that?
Yeah. Like I had for 15 years, like a normal like career job that I then kind also in the beginning as an engineer, but then as a coach and like an organizational person in the end. And after I left that to kind of dedicate my life to this kind of research about like sadomasochism and eroticism in a way, I also started to study things on the side. So then I studied theater directing for 2 years, because I wanted to learn about this kind of storytelling aspect of eroticism, and like this, like what you were into, like being how to be seen and how to kind of be validated in who we are. Because like also when we talk about like social shame and stuff like that, like of course, like you could practice BDSM, but if you only do it in your own bedroom where no one knows about it, then there's still kind of this shame aspect around it. So, like a big thing of it's not part of my therapeutic work, but more part of my like artistic endeavors in life is to create these kind of performative sexual spaces, like a play party where people can come and meet like-minded people and kind of have a place to be seen in their sexuality and see other people and be inspired by other people. So it's just something that I'm like super nerdy passionate about, and like how you create these spaces in the best way, because they are kind of on the borderline or in the borderland between like kind of the dream like and the surreal in a way, because I think the fantasy and the eroticism is very dream like and surreal. It's not always very concrete.
Mm.
And how do you kind of create a space for people to step into that? And it has everything to do with like how you create ambience with kind of live musicians, with lighting, with like building the room between rituals of entering, like protocols not to relate to each other, picking the right people. Like it's for me, it's like it's a whole. It's like painting a picture with like so many colors to pick and materials to pick from to kind of build this experience for other people. And for me, in a way, like if I say like the therapeutic work is that what I do with the people that maybe are the most hurt or that are in the most need for help in a way. It's focused to create the safest possible thing, the thing that I can stand behind as much as possible that this works. I don't gamble with you in a way. But if I want to go completely to the other side and like how far can I push it in my creativity, in my like personal expression, then comes this thing. It is almost kind of theatrical play parties. Yeah, where the goal is to take a risk, take a leap of faith, and hopefully like discover some new aspect of yourself. I often think about like the two difference between therapy and art, because like for me in therapy, the goal is to do the thing that you know that works, the thing that you kind of there's as little gambling there as possible. But when you do art, you gamble as much as you dare or as much as you can afford, because it's about discovering something new.
Yeah.
So whenever someone says that they do both, and someone says that they do healing art, then I get very worried because I'm like, okay, you're doing both the maximum gambling and the maximum safety at the same time. So I do try to do both of this, both the therapeutic part and the kind of art part, and not mix them too much.
Yeah, and I imagine that the people who are involved in the art aspect, everything is consensual and very clear and very transparent, and they agree to that. And maybe for some people, I know that in my therapeutic journey, the first time that I shared that with my therapist, I felt so, there is that combination of shame, but also pride of letting that aspect of you be seen, right? And it's so healing to let it out. And I felt that I was such a terrible person for having that aspect. And then when my therapist validated it and held it, and I was like, oh, okay, then it's actually not that bad, right? So I imagine that this is what happens also with the people that you work with, where they are witnessed in the process of showing themselves and being in their healing journey and showing aspects of themselves and actually being celebrated, being adored for these aspects in a public and artistic setting.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like a retreat is somewhere in between. It's kind of a more safer space, because then we're doing exercises and rituals and practices that I'm quite sure that this works well for most people. So it's kind of a place that is safer than everyday life, like going to a nightclub, because there is more focus on the container and the safety and like creating the right group and so on. But there is less safety than in the therapeutic session, because then there is only focus on the safety. So I think like for me, the retreat is like between the kind of completely weird art experience and the completely safe therapeutic experience.
I hear. So there is a space where actually a lot of people could find themselves safe, which is the retreat. And then you have the artistic part, which is more for people who are really ready to be full out. And then the therapeutic part, which is more for people who need a lot of support and one-on-one and actually be held in a very safe and contained kind of a space.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up.
You work with men, and I found it really, really beautiful. You come from Sweden, so probably it's a different dynamic with the. I always find myself uttering heteronormative things, so I'm constantly trying to voice it in a way that that respects non-binary. So you work with male bodies. And I need to know more about that experience.
As you say, I find it so interesting, because like the definition of what it is to be a man, and with this also non-binary aspect of life started to come more into it, and like exactly what kind of space I provide for men, it actually changes quite a lot in different like contexts. Sometimes I'm in the very heteronormative world of like tantra, and then it's more like brothers tying brothers, and it's kind of from competition to compassion into kind of more kind of queer spaces where it's more about like questioning what it is to be a man, and kind of working with like concepts as a like homosensuality. Like maybe I'm not want to have sex with other men, but I can like enjoy how it feels to be touched by another man, because maybe he's big and strong, and maybe he smells in another way. So like I can really like this kind of masculine male body in a way, or like what you considered. It's like doesn't matter what people have, but kind of like how they, what gender they consider, but it's more like what is the quality of the body in a way. Um, into this like kind of breaking down the idea of like what it means to be a man. Like I think like another touch for this, I think it's very interesting personally. Like I notice like when I'm being a man, I have a very hard time being a bitch. I have a very hard time being selfish as a man, because I'm very caretaking in my kind of masculine man, whatever I was brought up to be. So it's really, really interesting for me to kind of what happens if I kind of let go of this archetype of a man that I have in front of me and like try to be like a sadistic bitch instead. And like, so I kind of work with men in all of these different kind of, in this different scale. I think it's also like because 75% of my clients are women, so that is where I'm most secure in what I know and where it's very clear what I do. I think with men, it's still like a much more of like an exploration.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious if with men it touches more upon who you are and your identity, and it could be more challenging from that space too.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is that the way I teach bondage, that it's a lot of focus on vulnerability and on slowness and on feeling. So some men who don't know me, they think that they will kind of be put down by a big, powerful person who's going to dominate them and humiliate them. Because this is like the picture of like domination they have from like coming from like hierarchical society or from sports, maybe, where like the one who dominates, the one who beats the other one down in the boxing ring. And coming to a place where kind of where domination is kind of soft and listening and being present with each other and being vulnerable, that surprises many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also this also like what you like, because I think when you remove intimacy, so it doesn't have to be about fucking. That means that you can be intimate in more different ways, and like the kind of intimacy that I find between men or masculine people, it's so different depending on like what event and what kind of structure. If it's, I think that is also super interesting, because I think it allows people to bond, or like to share intimacy in a way that they didn't do before, and like find out that it could be so enjoyable. Like if I should take some of these like super heteronormative like examples, like guys who claim like having like a big man touching me is like he's so much stronger than my little girlfriend, and she can't grab me or hold me this way, or I can't put all my weight on my partner because I'm so much bigger than them. So like there's like so many like of these aspects that kind of becomes available to people as soon as you kind of disconnect intimacy from the fucking part in a way. But then this gets even more complicated, because I also, of course, invite homosexual people into my space. So they are obviously turned on, might be, on by what's going on. And like how do you deal with this is also interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about the conditioning that so many men received, and I think that you see it a lot in sexuality with holding back, because so many of, again, I will take a heteronormative perspective, but I imagine that even homosexual men who didn't share that they were homosexual, they were brought up in a similar way, which with the concept of what we now call toxic masculinity, right? Like a non-emotional, constantly showing power and force, even if that's just a facet to protect. So I imagine that when they come into your space and there is actually the container of you can explore aspects that are so unfamiliar for you,
Mm.
will get a little bit oops. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, some people are deeply touched by it, by being allowed to be vulnerable and be seen. Some people think that it's lame,
Mhm.
or like that they're like, what kind of, this is not real domination because you don't beat me down with a stick in a way.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that, mm, yeah. Well, I don't like it's also like I don't think I have enough people to have like a clear opinion. It's so different every time. Like, because I create also these spaces from everything in like very like artistic spaces to like very tantric spaces to more queer spaces to more BDSM spaces, and it's also like so different. So it's like what it is to be a man and like who is attracted to this. It's, yeah, it really changes all the time.
Mm.
I have this dream. There is like a gay tantra festival in the UK, and I would love to go there and teach there for like a week. I think it would be so interesting. Yeah.
Manifest it. Bring it.
Yes.
Bring it to
That's why I'm speaking out here now. Maybe there is one of the organizers of the gay tantra festival in the UK is listening to your pod.
yeah, that would be great actually. That would be great. um I can catch myself also being interested in labeling and finding somehow a spectrum of normality and something that we can agree on. And I think it's really beautiful what you brought into the discussion. Every experience is so unique and so special. And then we have, of course, traits. Like I'm going back to what I was saying. I think that a lot
Ah,
of
but I can take a little bit more like some general cases to kind of become a little bit more concrete.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I think the men that I mostly meet, I mean, either it's men that are kind of bored with this kind of with this idea of what it is to be a man, because they get to hear it's toxic to be a man. They and then some women seem to want them to be dominant in the bedroom, but they don't know how to switch from one to the other. So they're kind of okay. Like, I don't have energy, and I don't have like I can't care about this male, masculine, dominant stuff. So I just want to let it go, and I want to surrender. I want to feel my body. I want to focus to be on like my experience of letting go of control in a way.
Mhm.
Um, so these guys are very common, and I think like going down that path, I think everyone, both men and women and others, can have like a great exploration of like down in that of letting go of control and not trying to have power. Then I think there is another type, people who want to learn, or men or others who want to learn to be dominant, and like kind of, because when you're dominant you need to balance between holding space for the other person and like taking care of them, making sure that they like you, but also being selfish and like following your own desire and your own kind of yeah, desire is probably the best word for it, to follow your own kind of impulses. And the more deviant or the more perverted your impulses are, of course, the more vulnerable it becomes. Like what you shared about sadism, for example. If you would tell your therapist, like, yeah, I really like to eat strawberries when I'm having sex, it wouldn't be very vulnerable, because maybe everyone does that. But when you tell them, oh, I really like to be sadistic when I'm in my personality, then that's what's vulnerable. So like the more outside the norm, the more queer, the less straight you walk, the less you walk the straight line in a way, the more vulnerable it becomes of being selfish and expressing this kind of deviant or colorful or other side of yourself.
Mhm.
So learning to balance these two, like how do I hold space for someone and make them feel safe and supported so they can dare to submit and surrender to me, and how do I at the same time express my own like dominance, and how that may look. And maybe it does not look like it does in the movies or what I'm taught in society by like big muscular men standing there screaming at people. Like maybe my dominance is much softer than this.
Mm. Mm. And as you were talking about this, I was thinking this is probably why I love BDSM so much, and I love it in concept, in theory, because I feel that this is what life should be. like a constant negotiation and constant being in touch with your own body, with what is happening in the space, with what is happening on your partner's side, or depending on what is the context created, the other people involved in the scene. And like keeping this awareness and this presence, right? And that, I think that a lot of beauty stems from there, of how do I express fully who I am and what I feel now, while being engaged with the other's experience, and also holding, and also revering, having respect for them.
Hmm. Yeah. I think there's one thing we should bring up when we're talking about the theme of like BDSM and maybe also shibari and rope bondage and so on, because also when the theme of the pod is like healing in a way, because I think it's important to like make this distinction about like what one is looking for in their experience. Like, is it healing that I'm looking for, or is it kind of perversion, or like where are you on this scale? Because in what I notice in this kind of, I don't say what you say, in this sub community or this subculture, is that it start to get mixed up things. Because like, for example, right now when I'm in Japan for my like yearly vacation, where like the bondage that I come from, that I kind of am so passionate about, like here it is like this kind of perverted taboo and expression. I don't know if it's the darkest of our soul in a way, but I mean, it's not really aimed to be healing at all. It's a way to kind of explore the forbidden side of your sexuality, and kind of and not kind of mixing that up with kind of when you are actually creating a therapeutic space for someone. So like, because it's important for me when I speak about it, because like I have my Japanese teachers, and I mean, for them it's like, yeah, we want to keep like shibari and BDSM and kimbaku kind of perverted, dirty, hidden, underground, like it is in this background. And if I tell them that, yeah, I also do this as a healing like modality, they would like look at me and like shake their heads like, what are you talking about? And if I start to bring in spirituality in the whole thing, they was like, yeah, but when I tie up my partner, then I have to turn my Shinto spiritual statue away because it's not allowed to see what's going on. So like in that world, the goal was never to make it healing in a way. It was like an exploration of the dark eros in a way. And then when you kind of start to come into the world of Tantra, then it kind of starts to mix with spirituality and kind of doing for some greater personal development exploration that we have been talking a lot about. And then when you take it even one step further, you start to become, oh, this is going to even be like a healing modality. So actually, I think it's like super important to be like, because I want to both respect my therapy clients, but I also want to respect my old Japanese perverted BDSM people, and like how do I kind of keep both these people, stay true to both of them at the same time, because I think there's need for both of them in a way.
Yeah, and it's
That's my rant.
Sorry.
That's my rant.
No, I think
Right.
it's really great that you are bringing this, because I feel that maybe now we brought BDSM into the discussion, into the light, but we are trying to like put nice pretty makeup under the spiritual or healing umbrella, without being honest that it is for many people just a way of going to the depth of the darkest, most perverted, altered, distorted side of who they are. And that's okay, as long as it's consensual and the context is set for that, and everybody agrees, and it's safe for everybody, and it's not illegal or pathological in that way, then that's what it is. But when all participants have an equal level of information, right, and agreement, then yeah, it is what it is.
Yes, I think very much what's happening, like when this pods, and when like the tantric community is starting to like embrace like BDSM and polarity play and rope punch and so on, it's like it makes it available to much more people. And I think there's so much to learn in between them. I often say that like when I'm teaching, because when I'm teaching to BDSM people, then I teach people tantric techniques about opening the heart, being more vulnerable, being more present, feeling more with less. And when I teach to tantric people, then I teach BDSM stuff. And then it's about like, how do you reach a deeper polarity? How do you do more crazy techniques? How do you kind of go deeper into your own kind of perversion or your own kind of desires and your own kind of fantasies? So I think they have so much to learn from each other. And there is this kind of really huge overlap to me, looking for presence, looking for vulnerability. So I think that is where my passion is, in like overlapping these two worlds, and at the same time respecting both of them.
I don't know if this is a Oisho split that Oisho used to say. I don't know if it's him or somebody else. Whenever I meet a priest, he wants to talk about sex, and whenever I meet a prostitute, she wants to talk about God. So it's a little bit like that, right?
Yeah, I hadn't heard it before, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. We didn't touch, and I would have loved to touch a little bit upon that. There is so much abuse in the tantric industry or in the tantric context, right? And in the BDSM in the BDSM spheres, and it would have been interesting to touch a little bit upon that. That even in spaces that we design and we bring the awareness, and we are trying to create safe spaces because it became so available, you still have power dynamics that become abusive. And I imagine that you also encountered that. I had my fair share of that.
Yeah, I could talk a lot about it. Maybe it should be a follow-up.
Yeah. 1 hour of deconspiring everybody.
Yeah. I'm thinking about if I have like a 5 minutes thing to say about it. No, but I mean, I think if I should take a positive look out on it, or like look at it from a positive like perspective, I think that both like BDSM and Tantra was very much like kind of small activities. And that means also that they are not so extended to review, that people don't talk about what happened in the same to the same extent. They're not like being reviewed by external journalists. They're not being reviewed by psychologists. Like they kind of live their own little life. And when things comes like this little kind of echo chamber where kind of there's only one dogmatic idea, truth that lies, it's very easy for it to kind of become abusive, and it's easy to become kind of inbred in a way. But when it kind of starts to become more popular, then like the lines get shined upon these things. And then I think that this then starts to kind of expose, or like maybe even define what is like an abusive practitioner, and what is like a good practitioner, and what is an abusive teacher, and what is a good teacher. Because if you look because I think there needs to be like a certain amount of review of external kind of exposure about something for this discussion to happen. So when this kind of thing starts to happen, I think it's like a sign of that it's growing in a way. And yeah, so it becomes like harder to get away with being an abusive asshole, because people will talk about it. There will be forums, there will be like discussion, journalism, and kind of ways to kind of look upon what's happening from a more critical perspective.
Yeah,
I think we are in this process right now. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and I think it comes also with a lot of responsibility on both sides, because when you are dealing with a narcissist, you cannot expect the narcissist to be like, hey, I'm a psychopath narcissist, and here I am coming to your life to abuse everybody in this community. So I learned that at the beginning, when you come with the innocence and the curiosity, a lot of people, and this is a lot on the women spectrum, because we have been conditioned to be pleasing and to not be antagonistic and so on. So it's very difficult to call out on power dynamics and say, hey, you are coming from an authority space here as a teacher, and you are having a behavior that to me feels like harassment. So I do believe that it's more about educating people also around boundaries, and when something doesn't feel safe, to know how to go out of that, and to know where you can report, and like draw more sovereignty for the individual, more than expecting always the practitioner to be on their good behavior and to have rules and regulations that constantly overview. I mean, like the major organizations are now dealing with this, right? Like there are articles that are being written and forums that are speaking about different practitioners, and people have started creating more awareness. But yeah, as you said, as it's becoming more of a thing and more people are being drawn to this, there are adjustments in terms of
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes about it because one of my best friends work as a psychiatrist, and of course, like in like a psychiatrist organization, mostly working with refugees that has come from like a war background and like the post-traumatic stress that they carry. And I mean, of course, she has like a network of peers. They have like they cross review each other's cases. They have review boards. It's like I don't know if this was good, so that you can like submit the case, so you can get reviewed. You have your manager that's kind of supervising you and helping you. Like there's this whole kind of structure around how to provide like help in a very challenging situation. And then when you're this kind of standalone healer on your own side, I don't have that support network, so I think it also makes it very hard to be like to work in this kind of alternative world of therapy or therapeutic modalities.
Yeah, yeah. What motivates you to do the kind of work that you are doing?
Oh, that's a very good question. I mean, professionally, like with the therapeutic part of it, is because I see it helps people, and that people come to me without me kind of, I'm not such a salesy person, so like I don't market myself very much, but people tend to find me and kind of have this need, and then it feels meaningful to fulfill it. That's like one part of it. And but then like also that since my real passion is this kind of exploration of like this kind of sadomasochism and BDSM and eroticism and tantra, so like that I can take the knowledge that I gain from there that kind of become useful for people that are in this very vulnerable position. But yeah, I think I need all of these parts of it, both to do like the retreats that is more about teaching things and sharing things, the therapeutic side and the crazy artistic side. Like it's more like this kind of all that, yeah, that it can touch upon so many layers of myself and so many layers of like so many connection surfaces around me. I think that is quite interesting, and that I've been doing this for 20 years now, and it just I just keep learning more and more things in a way. And I think that is, yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I love it. I can see that you are passionate about bringing together all the pieces of the puzzle. So it's being of service and also embracing your natural curiosity and continuing to grow and gain more knowledge. So yeah, I honor that. Where can
Thank
you where can we see you online, Andy?
I mean, I'm kind of old school, so my webpage is the best place. There's like an old school newsletter. It's like a blog I write. I try to write 1,000 words every week upon like what I'm interested in about. And right now it's a bit slow because I'm writing a book. So I decided to stop creating new material to kind of reshape the old material. But eventually there will be like a revisited version of the work that I've been producing during the past 5 years on my webpage. So it's like maybe 500 pages of text around these subjects. And eventually it will become like a book that you can buy in a limited edition or get for free on the internet. It might become like a podcast on Spotify. Yeah, it's like I make my money giving retreats and sessions. I don't aim to be a writer, or like this will not be my livelihood, but it's kind of as a way to give my knowledge on somehow, or push it, or like make it more available. So andyburu.se I think is the way to go.
Yeah. So we're gonna add it in the description notes. And I really like that when I saw it on your on your website that I'm planning to go off social media. So the best way to be in contact with me is by subscribing to my newsletter. It also brings a lot of autonomy to what you want to share as information and not being subjected to censorship on different platforms, different social media platforms.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the friends I know who does the social media thing, it seems like I would need just as much competence in how the social media works as I need to have about like Tantra and BDSM. And I'd much rather spend my time researching Tantra and BDSM than social media.
Yeah, I get that. Thank you so much, Andy. It was a pleasure. I really, really appreciated this episode. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
The best way to support the Healer Hub podcast is to review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and share it with your people. Thank you so much. Deeply grateful for your support.